You know that feeling, right? That constant internal chatter, like you're being pulled in a million different directions at once. It's the sense of overwhelm that can be so hard to put into words. And that's exactly the feeling we're going to unpack today. Okay, so 2.5% might not sound like a huge number, but think about it. That's millions and millions of adults worldwide navigating this every single day. And, that classic picture we all have of a hyperactive kid bouncing off the walls? Yeah, that just doesn't even begin to cover what it's really like for an adult.
Right, so let's just tackle that myth head on. For the longest time, ADHD was seen as this childhood thing, something you just, grew out of. But the science? It tells a completely different story.
Just take a look at this. Now, while it's true that the prevalence is higher in kids, almost 3% of the adult population still has ADHD. We're talking about a massive number of people. It doesn't just vanish, it changes, it evolves.
And this shows you exactly how it evolves. In childhood, boys get diagnosed way more often than girls, about 2 to 1. This is usually because they show those more classic, disruptive, hyperactive symptoms. But look what happens by adulthood. That ratio almost completely levels out. This suggests that a lot of women are either getting diagnosed much later in life or their symptoms just look different from the very beginning.
So, if ADHD sticks around into adulthood, what is actually going on under the hood? Well, the science is pretty clear. This isn't some flaw in your character or a lack of willpower. It has real biological roots.
This number is just staggering. Seriously, 70 to 80%. That makes ADHD one of the most genetically linked neuropsychiatric conditions out there, even more so than things like depression or anxiety. It really means your family history is a huge, huge factor.
Now, to really get the mechanics, we have to talk about something called the default mode network, or DMN for short. Basically, think of it as your brain's idle mode. It's what kicks in when you're not focused on something specific in the outside world. When you're daydreaming or thinking back on a memory. It's your internal monologue.
Okay, so this is the key difference, right? In a neurotypical brain, when it's time to focus, that DMN quiets down, it goes into the background. But in an ADHD brain, it often just doesn't. It stays loud. It's like having a radio station playing in your head that you can't turn off. And it's not even playing the music you need for the task at hand. That's the interference. But, and this is super interesting, there's a flip side. That superactive DMN, it's also been linked to some serious creativity, making these really unique connections between ideas. So it's a total double-edged sword.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. We can actually see it. With tools like an EEG, scientists can measure these very real differences in brainwave activity. This image here, it basically represents that internal static, that measurable neurological noise that's going on because of the DMN interference.
Okay, so we've got this complex brain science. How does that translate into actually getting a diagnosis as an adult? Well, it's a really careful process, and it's all about looking for consistent patterns over a person's entire life. Look, a diagnosis is not about just having a bad day or being a little forgetful. Clinicians are looking for a persistent pattern. You need to have at least 5 distinct symptoms. They have to see evidence that this stuff started before you were 12, and it has to show up in different parts of your life, like at home and at work. And here's the kicker. It has to be causing you real significant problems. And yeah, it can get tricky. A lot of ADHD symptoms, like feeling restless or having trouble concentrating, can look a lot like anxiety or depression. So a good diagnosis means a clinician has to carefully untangle a person's history to figure out what's really driving what.
So once you have a diagnosis, what's next? The modern approach isn't about finding one single magic bullet. It's all about creating a combined plan, what we call a multimodal plan, that's really tailored to you as an individual.
Medication is often a really important piece of the puzzle. On one hand, you have stimulants. These tend to work quickly, and they're super effective for a lot of people because they boost key chemicals in the brain. On the other hand, you've got non-stimulants. They take a little longer to kick in, but they can give you this really smooth 24-hour coverage. They're a fantastic option for people who, for whatever reason, don't do well with stimulants.
But here's the thing. Medication almost always works best when you pair it with therapy. These kinds of therapies aren't about curing ADHD. They're about building practical, real-world skills. They help you learn to spot unhelpful thought patterns, manage those big emotional waves, and just develop the strategies you need to navigate your life more effectively.
Let's actually zoom in on one of these therapies that's really gaining steam. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. It's so powerful because it represents this huge shift in thinking. It's not about fixing something that's broken, it's about learning how to thrive with the unique brain you have.
This quote really gets right to the heart of what ACT is all about. Instead of constantly being at war with your own mind, the idea is to accept what is, figure out what you truly care about, your values, and then commit to taking action that moves you closer to those values, even when difficult thoughts and feelings show up. To make this a bit more real, let's talk about Jasmine. She was diagnosed at 24, and for her, the biggest struggle wasn't disorganization or forgetting her keys. It was this intense impulsivity and these flashes of anger that were really starting to damage her relationships. So picture this. She walks into a total crisis at work. Now, the old Jasmine, she probably would have just exploded. But this time, using her ACT skills, she does something totally different. First, she just notices the anger bubbling up. Then, and this is the key part, she accepts it. She doesn't try to shove it down. She just tells herself, okay, it's okay to feel angry right now. That little pause gives her the space to reconnect with what's actually important to her. In this case, her value of being a respectful coworker. And from there, she's able to act on that value, choosing to handle things calmly.
I love this illustration because it just captures it perfectly. ACT isn't about getting rid of bad mood FM. It's about realizing you're not the radio. You're the one who gets to choose which station to listen to. You can notice that negative broadcast is playing, but you don't have to let it drive the car.
So, from the deep brain science to therapies like ACT, it's clear our understanding of ADHD has come such a long way. So let's wrap things up by looking ahead at what's on the horizon.
Honestly, the future here is incredibly exciting. We've got these massive genetic studies that are pinpointing risk factors with more accuracy than ever before. Brain imaging is giving us a much clearer map of how all these neural networks are wired. And there are all these new digital tools, everything from VR for diagnostics to apps that are kind of like a therapy assistant in your pocket, all designed to make treatment more personal and more accessible.
You know, all of this progress leaves us with a really fascinating question. We're moving away from seeing ADHD as just a deficit and more toward understanding it as a genuinely different kind of brain wiring. So as our tools and our therapies get even smarter, are we on the verge of not just treating ADHD, but completely redefining what it means to live and even to thrive with it?